Welcome to Better Than Ever Live, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening. I hope you're making today and this entire holiday season, hope you're making it your masterpiece. My name is Dr. David Geier, orthopedic surgeon, sports medicine specialist, and media medical expert. I help you feel and perform your best regardless of age, injuries, or medical conditions. Very, very, very excited to be here to join all of you. Vaishnav, good to see you. And I apologize if I'm saying that wrong. I know I used your name on the last show, but very excited you're here for the second to last live show that I'm doing in 2021. I'll be here next Tuesday, taking Thursday off, but very, very excited to be here. Also, some changes are coming for next 2022. I think my brain is already on the holiday break, but some interesting things. I am working out a way to try to increase the number of days a week I do this show. I've got to make some schedule changes with clinics and things like that, as well as types of content and maybe the format of this show. Some people have suggested maybe doing, instead of all the new studies on all sorts of different health and wellness topics on a given day, maybe I do sleep one day, and maybe I do longevity another day. And so there's a lot of different things that I may try out in early 2022. So keep an eye out for that. As always, in everything we're going to talk about today, we have a lot we're going to talk about longevity and aging and health span and all that kind of good stuff. But all of these studies, what we're going to talk about, I am not giving you medical advice. This is meant for general information and educational purposes only. If you have specific medical questions or medical concerns, please, please, please talk to your doctor. If you want to come see me as a patient, if you have a bone or joint problem, you want to talk to an orthopedic surgeon, especially somebody that knows a lot about some of the new treatments, peptides and exosomes and stem cells and all of this, all sorts of great supplements that are out there for bone and joint health, you're welcome to see me in Charleston, South Carolina or Charlotte, North Carolina. Go to my website, drdavidgeier.com. You'll see a page at the very top that you can use to contact me. That gets to me. Tell me what the nature of your problem is. I send that over to my medical assistant and we work on setting that up. But I am not here to promote my practice. Just know that that is an option. All right. A lot of good stuff to get to today. And Edgar, I saw your question. I will do my best to get to that at the end of the show. And yes, Merry Christmas to you as well. All right, so we're going to start talking about exercise today. We're going to start and end with topics about exercise, but like I said, a lot of longevity. But we're going to start with something that affects longevity because it's the fourth leading cause of death, and it's one that has probably, I don't know the numbers if this is actually true, but I would bet it is, and that is something that's increased during COVID-19, and that is pneumonia. And the reason I say it's increased during COVID-19 might set up the infection in the lungs, but then that can be one of the reasons that kills you. But it's one of the leading causes of death among people that are older, people with compromised immune systems or other chronic medical conditions. Well, new study from the University of Bristol published in Geroscience, that says that people who exercise regularly can reduce your risk of dying from pneumonia, can also reduce the risk, the length, and the severity of your pneumonia. Now, you think, all right, well, I don't have pneumonia. What does it matter? Well, again, fourth leading cause of death in the world, former smokers, alcoholics, and people that drink a lot of alcohol, people with diabetes, people with kidney disease, all at risk for pneumonia. Not that anybody's not, but those are the most common risks. Plus, respiratory illnesses, upper respiratory issues in the winter, COVID-19, all of these things can cause an infection in your lungs. Then all of a sudden you end up in a pneumonia. You need long-term antibiotics, sometimes get admitted to the hospital. Walking just once a week for 30 minutes was shown in this study published in Geroscience to lower your risk of pneumonia. So we're going to talk a little bit later on about health span and if we increase how long you live in life. If you're not healthy, that's just going to be more years that you're using a walker, more years that you're bedridden, more years that you can't go up the stairs without getting out of breath, more years fighting illnesses like pneumonia. So really, really important that you exercise and keep yourself in as good a health as possible. Another common cause of death is strokes. We're going to pivot from the fourth leading cause of death to another top five cause of death. Somebody in the United States has a stroke every 40 seconds. Somebody dies of a stroke every 4 minutes. 800,000 Americans in the United States have a stroke every year. Really, really, really common and unfortunately very bad cardiovascular event. There's a new study out of the European Society of Cardiology. It's in their European Heart Journal, that looked at over 13,000 patients that had a stroke. And what they were looking for was they were looking for risk factors, but not risk factors overall over a long period of time. Things like obesity, things like high blood pressure, smoking. They were looking for very short-term risks. What happens in the hour leading up to a stroke, and are there particular things that put you at higher risk? And they found two that are particularly bad. I actually talked about this in a TV interview this week. One is being angry in the hour leading up to the stroke. 1 in 11 stroke survivors had an intense period of anger in the hour leading up to their stroke. Scary, right? Another one in 20 patients did a period of very intense physical exertion in that hour leading up to the stroke. The anger was associated with all kinds of strokes. The physical exertion was just a specific type of stroke, intracerebral hemorrhage, where there's a bleed in the brain, much less common. But still, the anger especially, and maybe the brief period of physical exertion were certainly worrisome. Now, as far as it pertains to the physical exertion, what they're not saying is, these researchers, that exercise is bad. If anything, exercise is very good for your risk of stroke and lowering your risk. But if you're really bad cardiovascular disease and then you do something really, really physical, yes, it does increase that risk a little bit. But the anger is something worth trying to keep in control as much as possible, whether that's meditation and mindfulness, whether that's seeing a therapist. And sometimes, what we don't know here, are these angry people generally, or are these people that are pretty happy-go-lucky, so to speak, and then all of a sudden something sets them off and then they end up having a stroke? It'd be really, really interesting to imagine. What would be awful is if you have a period of anger and then you have a stroke and you then regret whatever it was you were angry about for years, forever. It's really, really sad. So something to kind of keep an eye on. All right. One of the things that I have noticed over the last 3 or 4 years as an orthopedic surgeon, and one of the questions I ask people as part of, how did you get hurt? How'd you hurt your knee? How'd you hurt your shoulder? And, what treatments you've had. One of the questions I always ask is, have you tried over-the-counter medications? Things like Advil or Aleve, anti-inflammatory medications. Not because I endorse those by any means, but as much as I'm just curious what all they've tried. I ask about ice and taping and all sorts of other things. And more and more over the last 3 or 4 years, people will ask me about using turmeric. No, they don't ask so much about turmeric. They just say that they've been doing that as opposed to taking Advil or Aleve. And the idea is that turmeric is an anti-inflammatory. Well, there is a new study published in the journal Nutrition Journal that looks at turmeric extract and its potential health properties. Now, just so you know, turmeric is not what's actually doing the job. The active ingredient in turmeric that's causing its supposed health benefits is a substance called curcumin. And I've always been a believer that turmeric is great because of its curcumin content, but there's not that much curcumin in it, and that's where a supplement can be really helpful. Well, this suggests I might be wrong about that, actually. So again, this study is in Nutrition Journal, and it's a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, which is a good study. Now, unfortunately, it was funded by House Wellness Foods Corporation, a Japanese company that sells, in theory, sells products like this, which makes me a little leery. But again, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled. And again, there are a lot of studies on turmeric and curcumin. But what they looked at were the different health benefits of an extract using hot water and curcuma longa, which again is a turmeric extract. And they put 90 healthy but overweight people between the ages of 50 and 69 into two groups, one that either got, and they were randomly assigned, one that got turmeric extract, one that got placebo, and they did that for 12 weeks. They found 3 health benefits in the turmeric group. One, the group that was on turmeric had improvements in body weight and body mass index after 4 weeks, after 8 weeks, and after 12 weeks. So if you're overweight, a turmeric, either adding it to your food or a curcumin supplement, may be very helpful for you. They also had decreases in visceral fat. Again, that's the fat around your internal organs that is thought to be really, really bad for cardiovascular risk. So that was good. Body mass index, body weight, lower visceral fat. Getting back to what my patients had been telling me about using it as an anti-inflammatory, they also measured 2 markers of inflammation, C-reactive protein and complement component 3. Both were decreased in the group that takes turmeric. So that is potentially good. That's where the chronic inflammation, those are markers of inflammation that are associated with chronic diseases like osteoarthritis and Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease and a number of other issues later in life. And last, the group that took turmeric had improvements in their mental health scores. So it's at least worth thinking. Now, obviously, we need more studies, and it's at least worth talking to your doctor about and considering either a curcumin supplement or adding turmeric to your daily diet for potential health benefits. I am not aware of any significant side effects with turmeric, any adverse health risks, but certainly potentially very good. Robert, Merry Christmas to you as well. All right. So I have tried pretty much every diet in America, not so much to lose weight or around the world, not to lose weight, but just to see what works best for me. I've tried high carb, no fats. I did that many years when I was younger. I've done keto and modified keto. I've done the slow carb diet that Tim Ferriss does. I've lots of different things. And I also read a lot of nutrition books. I read a lot of health books or listen to the audiobooks. And I know that I've listened to several nutrition audiobooks that are very pro low carb diets, whether it's keto or modified keto, but definitely lowering carbs. But that goes against decades of what's been promoted with the food pyramids and the American Heart Association and Harvard, according to these audiobooks and these books, that have always preached the dangers of high-fat diets and saturated fats. Well, there is a new blog post, or what looks like a blog post on Harvard's site, talking about a study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition about saturated fats. And I want to talk about this because I feel like it's important. The study that they're talking about, American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, had 164 people that were all overweight or obese. They were put on a weight loss intervention for 12 weeks, or for I don't know how long they were on that trial, but they all lost 12% of their body weight. Then they took the 164 people, randomly assigned them to one of 3 diets where protein was kept at 20% of their diet, but then what was adjusted, each of the 3 diets had different amounts of carbs and different amounts of fats. One group, low carb, 20% of their calories from carbs, 60% of their calories from fat. So a very high fat diet. 21% of those calories were saturated fat. That's what, again, the food pyramid, the American Heart Association, everybody's been preaching against for decades. One was moderate carb, moderate fat, and a moderate amount of saturated fat. That was basically the typical American diet. That's pretty close to the typical American diet. And then one was high carb, low fat, and very low saturated fat, which is basically what's recommended in the dietary guidelines for Americans. Those people did that for 20 weeks, and they didn't make the food. Somebody else made their food every day for 20 weeks or 5 months. Over the course of the time, they had their blood measured for all kinds of markers of cardiovascular disease. Here is what's interesting. The low carb, high fat, and again, high saturated fat group, they actually had the same good and bad cholesterols, LDL, HDL, as the other groups. Their cardiovascular risk scores, their lipoprotein a, which is one of the bad lipoproteins for cardiovascular disease, and adiponectin were all improved the most. So, what they're saying, and what Harvard is admitting, is at least short-term, low-carb, high-fat diet is certainly not bad for you and may actually be good for you. Now, they do point out, and this is worth pointing out, that these people didn't get the typical Atkins, bacon and eggs and sausage and things like that. It was a fairly healthy, high-fat diet. It was more like the Mediterranean diet with salmon. It had unsaturated fats, monounsaturated fats, and not that much things like sausage and things like that. But at least in the short term, it seemed to not be bad and may actually be good for your risk factors for cardiovascular health. I say this only because I really am starting to see a turn in what we recommend dietary-wise, that high-fat, low-carb diets may not actually be so bad. Again, I do feel like it matters where those fats come from. If you can get it from fish and healthier fats, and maybe not so much from maybe as much red meat, especially unhealthy red meat and that type of thing. But we're starting to see, when you start to see Harvard say, hey, maybe this may not be so bad, that may be a sign that that food pyramid may start to change. But it'll be interesting to see. There's a lot of funding and a lot of the food industry that sort of likes the status quo, so keep that in mind. One of the challenges I have, and I'm a big believer in organic fruits and vegetables. The challenge that I personally have with organic fruits and vegetables is they go bad pretty quickly. So you have to eat them pretty fast because they don't have all the preservatives and that kind of thing. And a lot of times different things aren't in season. Well, this is not a study. This was an interview I read with two dietitians, one that is a spokesperson for the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. One is a bariatric coordinator at Emory. And the question was, are canned fruits and canned vegetables healthy? And that matters, but for two reasons, at least in my mind. One, canned fruits and vegetables last a long time. They can last for years. You don't have to eat them right away, so less chance that they go bad on you, like my one carton of organic grapes and 2 cartons of organic strawberries that I'm probably going to lose because I didn't eat them fast enough. So they stay good for a long time. But maybe more importantly is that they are cheaper. There's a study in the American Journal of Life Medicine. Canned food options are about 20% as expensive as fresh produce, meaning you save a lot. For every $1 you spend on fresh produce, canned would only cost you 20 cents. So, are they healthy? Well, a couple things worth pointing out that these two dietitians talk about, and this is important to know. One, in canned fruits and vegetables, fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, basically are preserved. Protein is preserved. Fiber is preserved during the canning process. All good. And the water-soluble vitamins B and vitamin C, you lose those a little bit because of the heat involved in the canning process. So you might still need to get your vitamin C, vitamin B somewhere else. But one thing you need to look out for is that canned fruits and vegetables can be high in bisphenol A, or what's called BPA, which has been shown in numerous studies associated with issues like your circulating hormones, cardiovascular health, obesity, reproductive health in men and women, and potentially hormone-related cancers in children. Now, a number of companies, Del Monte, Trader Joe's, and others, have gotten rid of BPA in their canned foods, so it can be important to look, if you're worried about that, look on the can to make sure it's a BPA-free can. Also, pay attention to the salt and sugar in canned foods. Obviously, depending on how healthy you want to be, you want to avoid added sugar. Salt is added. I actually thought salt was added for the preservation of the foods in the can. Apparently not. They say that it's not for preservation, means it's there to add flavor. So that's something to pay attention to. When I did the slow carb diet, I remember Tim Ferriss talked about, you can do even refried beans as part of that diet, but watch out because they have tons of sodium. So something to think about as you are trying to stay healthy. Canned fruits, canned vegetables may not be the worst option. Now, if you can get organic, that's obviously great. If you can get fresh, that's obviously great. But canned can be an alternative and may save you a little money. All right, let's do a little bit about longevity and lifespan and health span, and then I want to get to a study about exercise and exercise endurance. One of the things that we know or are starting to know with longevity and lifespan, one of the key factors appears to be something called senescence. Basically, what this means is as we get older, our cells get damaged. Those damaged cells, normally, our bodies clear it away, and parts of the body clear it away through a process called apoptosis. And that works great when we're younger, but as you get older, we lose that ability to get rid of those damaged cells. They accumulate, and then that can cause inflammation in a number of chronic diseases. Again, we've talked a lot on this show about chronic inflammation, but cellular senescence and accumulation of those damaged or dead cells can cause inflammation that can be associated with certain cancers, diabetes, osteoporosis, heart disease, stroke, Alzheimer's disease that we've talked about, other dementias, and what I care about in the world of orthopedic surgery is arthritis. So we need to find ways to address this cellular senescence. And there are a class of medications that are starting to get attention that are senolytics. Rapamycin's thought to have a senolytic effect. Metformin's thought to have a senolytic effect, which is why you see anti-aging doctors a lot of time prescribe those medicines. Well, there's a new study that was just published, where was this? In Nature Metabolism, where the researchers looked at 46 plant extracts and compounds trying to find out if any of those have senolytic effects. And they found one that was very promising, and that's grapeseed extract. Why? Well, it has a compound called PCC1, procyanide, I'm not sure how you say it. PCC1 has a couple effects. One, they gave human prostate cells PCC1, and it killed the senescent cells, those damaged cells, left normal cells intact. But this study involved mice, 91 mice, older mice. They were 24 to 27 month old mice, but that equates to 75 to 90 years old in humans. Every 2 weeks, they gave the mice PCC1. It increased the mice, their lifespan 60%, which is stunning. And how it did that was, one, a senolytic effect, getting rid of all those senescent cells, and two, it had an anti-cancer benefit. Now, there's a lot we need to know. We need human trials with grapeseed extract or grapeseed extract supplements in this PCC1, but could be something we hear a whole lot about over the coming years as far as longevity. But here's the thing, and even the researchers talk about this. It is not about increasing your lifespan at all costs. You don't want to be 120 but have 50 years of negative health or bad health issues. And what we're hoping is grapeseed extract with some of these other things may not just improve lifespan, but improve health span. And so that gets to this next study talking about one of the problems with boosting longevity, increasing your lifespan, having you live longer, is that's just more years with issues. If you have a lot of health issues, let's just say here, if you have issues with health, say when you're 65, it makes retirement difficult because you're not really able to work because of these health issues, but now you've got all this time to live and you're not able to make the money. You face these big healthcare bills dealing with a lot of health expenses. So there was a study by this company called Vitality. They partner with health insurance companies and employers to promote healthy living. And what they did is they looked at 5 risk factors with the largest impact on health span: tobacco use, smoking, obesity, high blood sugar, bad diet, and high blood pressure. They found that things like eating a healthy diet, engaging in physical activity, not smoking, modified your risks for those adverse health conditions the best. Probably not a surprise. There was data from the global burden of disease, and this is why all this talk about longevity is it's very good for people that are going to modify their health, but it's potentially a problem for all of society. And this comes, again, this global burden of disease is a database maintained by the University of Washington's Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation, which became famous tracking all the COVID data early on. But what they found is that at age 65 here in the United States, the average remaining lifespan has risen over the last 30 years from 17.6 years left of life to 19.6 years of life left. That's an increase in 2 years in remaining life expectancy. But the healthy life expectancy only went up less than 1 year in that period of time, meaning we're living 2 years longer, but about only one of those years you're actually healthy. Not necessarily a good thing. World Health Organization says about the same thing. In the United States, life expectancy at age 60 went up 8% between 2000 and 2019, but healthy life expectancy didn't even go up 5%. So it's all good and fine to live till you're 100 to 120, 130, but if you're not healthy for any of it, you can't go up the stairs, you can't walk without a cane, you can't function, you can't work, you can't play with your grandkids. Not necessarily a great thing. So yes, we want things that help us live longer and feel better, but more importantly, we need to improve our health span. And that, again, that's why we talk about all this stuff. It's better sleep, it's exercising regularly, it's eating healthy, it's getting your risks of these chronic medical conditions down, lowering your chronic inflammation, all very, very important to improve your health span. That's what we want to achieve more than just living longer. All right. Couple things, last things real quick about life expectancy and feeling good. 3 sports apparently increase your life expectancy the most. This was a study published in Mayo Clinic Proceedings. It was a study from the Copenhagen City Heart Study. Over 8,500 people over the age of 25. And they looked at sports and exercise and which ones increased your life expectancy the best. Which ones do you think that was? All right, the top 3. Number 1, tennis added 9.7 years to your life. Badminton, 6.2 years to your life. And soccer, 4.7 years to your life. Fantastic, right? The next 2, cycling and swimming. And those were 3.7 years and 3.4 years. Here's what's interesting about this. The top 3, tennis, badminton, and soccer, are all social sports. They're team sports. You play them with other people, which is thought to be, according to the authors of this study, why they were at the top. And that goes along with, again, that book that I've told you a lot about, Blue Zones. One of the factors when they looked at places that have a lot of centenarians, people that live 100 years or longer, Loma Linda, California, a region in Costa Rica, Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, a lot of them, probably most of them, the people were still social late in life. And so maybe a sport like tennis, badminton, soccer, it's because you're around other people. Maybe that's why pickleball has grown so fast here in the United States. Not only is it good exercise, but you're with other people. So think about that as far as being active now and as you get older. Something else to think about as you're getting older, we talk about how life seems to go really quickly. We always talk about that with kids, right? You have kids, they're babies. You think, I got 18 years left with them, and how it seems to go faster and faster and faster. Well, that's probably true with aging as well. That when we're kids, time seems to go really slowly, and then our years seem to pass faster and faster. But there may be actually something to that generally. It's a biological measure called an epigenetic clock, where scientists look at your DNA and changes in your DNA and see why some people age faster than others. Well, this study in translational psychiatry, Yale researchers looked at a specific epigenetic clock called Grimm age, and they wanted to know 2 things. 1, does chronic stress accelerate your biological clock? And then 2, are there ways to slow it down and extend, again, your health span, how long you're healthy? So what they found, and they used 444 people between 19 and 50 that got blood samples or gave blood samples to measure those epigenetic changes in Grimm age, and then they answered surveys talking about their stress levels and psychological resistance. And what they found, even when they sort of accounted for things like smoking and obesity and race and how much money they made, the ones that had the highest levels of chronic stress had highest markers of aging and other changes like insulin resistance. But the aging, basically, the more you feel stress over a longer period of time, the faster your body ages. That is probably not good for me. So stress, the thing they found though, that stress didn't affect everybody the same. The people that measured highest on scales of psychological resistance or resilience, not resistance. That would increase your stress. Psychological resilience, and I kind of wonder. I didn't see the scale. I kind of wonder if it's like Angela Duckworth's grit scale. Be interesting to know. But basically, the ones that had better emotion regulation and self-control, the stress didn't seem to affect them like it did people that didn't have that. So the more resilient you are, the longer you're going to live and the healthier you're going to live. You got to get rid of that stress, whether that's anger management and therapy, whether that's mindfulness and meditation. Have to get that under control. Got to keep that in mind myself personally. All right, last thing, and I just thought this was funny, and it's a study about laughter, but really interesting. Study out of Georgia State looked at improving aerobic endurance in running. And what they did, they had a group that did, they had a control group and then a group that did 2 45-minute training sessions a week. And the experimental group had to do a laughter exercise during their run, at various points during their run. What they found is that laughing while you exercise relaxes the muscle, it improves blood flow, and helps you recover from that exercise, basically boosting their endurance. It also increased their pain threshold by 10%, presumably through endorphins. So, I don't know how you would actually do that if you are a runner or doing some other endurance exercise, how you just make yourself laugh and have some of those benefits. But that's certainly a good thing. Maybe you listen to podcasts that are funny or comedy routines on something like Apple Music or Spotify, but may help you not just perform better, but just get through it better. Less pain, you feel better, more blood flow to the muscles, endurance, all potentially good. All right, let me read some of the questions and comments. If you have comments or thoughts on some of the stuff we talk about, certainly let you know. And Vaishnav, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you as well. Edgar, ACL allograft, stretched my graft. One thing, when you have an ACL tear, that first time, you very likely are going to have a pop. It feels like your knee exploded, traumatic event. When you have a revision or a second injury, a recurrent injury, very often you don't have that big pop the second time, especially if you have an allograft was the graft of the first surgery. If you followed me for any period of time, you know I'm not a super big proponent of allografts for ACL surgeries in most settings. Not always true, but most of the time, especially for younger people, I feel like autografts using tissue from your knee is better for most people. But because allografts have higher re-tear rates, but very often you do not have a big explosion in your knee specific event. A lot of times it can be more subtle. Sometimes you do, but most of the time you don't. And Edgar, again, Merry Christmas. I appreciate all the holiday wishes. That means a lot to me. Fiber in meals. High fiber meals. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to, I'll have to think about that. I mean, you can look on nutrition labels, whether or not, vegetables typically are high fiber. That's probably where I would start. Whole grains are high fiber, not as big on those generally as green vegetables, the broccoli, spinach, things like that. But whole grains can be good as well. Robert, difference between subcutaneous and visceral fat. All right, so that's actually really interesting. So the fat that you can see, what he calls, let me put this back on the screen, what's jiggly is subcutaneous fat. Not necessarily a good thing, but not nearly as bad as visceral fat. So if you sort of grab your stomach and it jiggles, that's subcutaneous fat. Always good to lose, but that's not the worrisome one. You cannot see or feel visceral fat. That's deep inside your body, around your stomach and intestines and pancreas and gallbladder and kidneys. That's hard fat. That is the dangerous fat. That is also very tricky to lose. Steady state cardio is thought to do that. So if you run for 30 or 60 minutes a day, that's actually thought to be good for visceral fat. I've not yet seen studies on high intensity interval training in visceral fat. I don't really know why steady state exercise would be better than high intensity interval training for visceral fat, but it is something to think about. There are peptides that are thought to help reduce visceral fat. CJC 1925 with ipamorelin has been studied to reduce visceral fat, so that's something to think about. That's the kind of things, but the visceral fat is what you want to worry about, and that is really hard to know if you have that unless you get a study like a DEXA scan, which is really the gold standard for body fat analysis and body mass index. So if you have access to an anti-aging clinic, or some medical practices have DEXAs, those can be very good for assessing that. Should I drain the water in canned vegetables before you use? I don't know that it matters from a health standpoint or from a like that bisphenol A, even though that, again, that's more just is it in the can. But draining them and rinsing them can be good to lower the sodium content for what that is worth. 1 apple a day, eating apple after apple, hungry. What's the substitute of apples? So I love apples. I put them in my protein shakes. My only problem with apples is it's basically simple sugars. And again, depending on how you feel about carbs, maybe not really the best thing. What would be a substitute? Anybody that's watching, give me some ideas for substitutes. If you're going fruit route, maybe bananas, maybe... You'll have to think about that, because apples have fiber, unlike things like some of the other fruits that really don't have as much fiber. So that is interesting to think about it. And then stretch in the graft, same thing as an ACL tear. Maybe, maybe not. Generally, you can get an MRI that shows an ACL torn versus stretched out, especially it's a graft. But what matters with a graft ACL is whether or not it's stabilizing the joint. And so it can be intact but stretched out, and that knee's still not stable. So that's not something an MRI is as good at telling as just examining the knee and see if it gives out, something called a pivot shift test that an orthopedic surgeon can do to see if your knee is unstable or not. That can tell you. All right, that is all I have for you. Please, if you know other people that have bone or joint questions or that like health and wellness information on sleep and aging and exercise and nutrition and all the kind of good stuff we talk about here, definitely tell them about this show. If you like this show, definitely follow, get the podcast version so you can listen wherever you are. We're having a trouble with the feed, but it should be restored very soon. Definitely come back each time, every Tuesday and Thursday. And in 2022, it very likely may be more days of the week at noon Eastern time. DrDavidGeier.com is where you can find everything on my website, but it's Dr. David Geier everywhere on social media. DrDavidGeier. Thank you so much for watching and for listening, and I will see you right here next Tuesday. Have a Merry Christmas and a wonderful holiday season, no matter what religion you are. Very, very excited and grateful for all of you, and I will see you all very soon.